I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. I got the legs to the doxy nothing and tat, and I feel so tender there looking at that, and it's an injury. Let's go down here to do something clever. What goes now? It's gonna get the lid on the leg, don't it? Don't it? Hey,
Back in the 1970s and 1980s, ventriloquism had a strong presence in mainstream culture, where a plethora of light entertainment variety TV shows gave platform to vent acts alongside magicians, stand-up comedians, and nightclub singers. Characters like Orville the Duck and Nucky Bear were household names, and there would be no shortage of lesser-known acts appearing in guest slots on shows like Seaside Special or Opportunity Knocks. Shows that, in the days before multi-channel TV, were watched by half the country. So of course we all wanted to try it at home. More fool us. This is the Overlooked Hotel, and this is the story of Mr. Parlanchin. The idea of the ventriloquist dummy long had a sinister edge, thanks in part to films like 1945's Dead of Night and 1964's The Devil Doll, and some of these dummies looked decidedly creepy with their fixed faces, blinking eyes, and flapping jaws. It's perhaps why, as the events made their way onto TV, the dummies became less human. A fluffy animal, no matter how naughty it might be, is a lot less unsettling than a miniature man with a taunting voice. Still, if you were a kid in the 1970s, ventriloquism was definitely something that fascinated you. Everybody had a go at throwing their voice, a misunderstanding of terminology and physics that made us believe that we could make our voice come from another part of the room, if only we learned some kind of mysterious technique, possibly via a comic book ad. And a "gottle of gear" was oft heard stiff-lipped pronunciation of "bottle of beer," the standard test phrase for would-be vents. B is the hardest letter to say without moving your lips. But none of this ventriloquism mastery really mattered unless you had a dummy, and in the 1970s, that meant the nightmare fuel known as Mr. Parlanchin. Mr. Parlanchin was a child-friendly ventriloquist dummy, at least in terms of physical size, that came from Spain and was a mainstay of the toy shops and the Christmas mail order catalogues for several years until sanity prevailed. Parlanchin is a Spanish term meaning chatty, and in Britain it sounded suitably exotic and unusual enough to not need a translation. There are at least 3 variations of the dummy: Harry, Charlie, and Norbert, and despite their Spanish origins, all tended to look suspiciously like dodgy Cockney geezers, a sort of cheeky, untrustworthy spiff from yesteryear. The dummies resembled characters from a past that was only familiar to the target market through old movies, and that just made them all the odder. Each dummy had a hole in his back where the operator inserted their hand. 2 finger hooks controlled the opening and closing of the eyes and the mouths, and you could also swivel the head. It involved a certain dexterity, and the controls would often be quite stiff, especially for younger kids. It was also, if memory serves, a bit uncomfortable to twist your arm into the right position to hold him on your knee for very long. The most commonly seen of the Parlanchins in the UK was Charlie, who wore a checked jacket and flat cap, and topped off the ensemble with a shock of unruly ginger hair. Perhaps he looked more British than the others, or perhaps he was the cheapest option, but this is the one who I recall from the Little Woods and John Moore's catalogue pages, from my local toy shops, and, most significantly, from finding inside the colourful and multilingual box that I eagerly unwrapped one Christmas morning. I'd long wanted one of these ventriloquist dummies, gripped with juvenile fantasies that I would quickly master the art and be on my way to fame and fortune. This, of course, didn't happen. As I mentioned earlier, Charlie Parlanchin was not the easiest character to operate, and his hard plastic body was both heavy and cumbersome. My ventriloquism skills did not come along in leaps and bounds. Boredom rapidly set in, and Charlie became another of those toys that were more exciting in anticipation than actuality. As a toy, it had limited play opportunities. The size and rigidity meant that, unlike glove puppets or emu puppets, you could hardly carry it about. You had to basically sit down and practice your moves, which felt more like work than fun. It was also a rather solitary toy, and like board games, action figures, and the like, there was no real opportunity to play with friends unless you'd actually mastered the art. In the end, there was little incentive to sit alone in my bedroom, scraping my fingers on the metal pulleys and trying to coordinate the mouth opening to my cries of "Gottle of gear!" Charlie might at this point have been confined back to his box, but the box, of course, had long since been thrown out. So he was placed on a chair in the corner of my bedroom. This meant, of course, that I could wake up at night and see his shadowy presence staring at me from across the room. The box slogan, "Always laughing," didn't seem quite so appealing by this point. The build quality of the Parlanchins does seem to have been a bit basic. No doubt if you took care of him, he would last for years, but these were being sold to kids, not adults. And the very point of the dummy was that you would work with the moving parts, the eyes and the mouth, to the point of destruction. Inevitably they'd break. My Parlanchin developed a wonky eye, and then his jaw broke, leaving his mouth hanging open at a slight angle. He was still laughing, but nobody else was. Being a naturally untidy child with a limited amount of bedroom space, Charlie was soon covered in clothes and other toys, a sad and broken figure by the end of things. I think his hair was also coming loose by this time, and I was finally persuaded by my parents, who, of course, were full of the usual admonishments about my lack of appreciation for present and general slovenliness, to throw him out. Presumably, he became a delightful surprise for the poor bastards who emptied our bins that week. The Parlanchin range didn't seem to make it to the end of the decade, though I'm happy to be given more details of his history, which is inevitably shrouded in some mystery. It's hard to imagine any parent wanting to buy something like this for their kids today, and even harder to imagine any kids wanting it to begin with. Invariably, the dummies now sell, or more accurately, are being offered for sale, because I've not seen any evidence of people actually paying these amounts, for ludicrously high prices, £400 plus, on the collector's market. Let us know in the comments if you had a Mr. Parlanchin, if you mastered the art of ventriloquism, if this was the start of a glittering career for you, or did he just sit giving you nightmares in the corner of your bedroom, much as mine did. And if you enjoy this kind of ancient history, then don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and feel free to support us on Patreon or buy me a coffee. This has been the Overlooked Hotel. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again soon.